Translate this, the tycoon scoffed, chuckling as if it were the funniest joke in the world, and I'll write you a check for $1 million right now. The boardroom erupted in sycophantic laughter. That is, until the child spoke. The sound died in their throats instantly. Ferrara Tower loomed over the skyline, a 60-story obelisk of ego. Its glass and steel facade mirrored the clouds, hiding the reality that the laborers who built it were barred from ever entering the lobby. Up in the penthouse suite, the oxygen itself felt thinner, rarefied, and the hand-woven rugs were worth more than a family home. But right now, a drama was unfolding that would alter the course of their lives. Luciana Vega's fingertips were ice cold. It wasn't the climate control keeping the boardroom at a crisp 68 degrees. It was the sheer panic flooding her bloodstream. She stood isolated in a sea of suits, all staring at her like she was a smudge of dirt on their pristine Italian leather loafers. Her mother, Renata, hadn't had a choice. With no babysitter available, she had to drag Luciana along to work. Schools were closed. It was either bring the girl to the tower or leave a child unattended in their cramped apartment. Renata picked the option she thought was safe. She couldn't have been more wrong. "And just what," a voice boomed, "is this?" Maximiliano Ferrara's voice sliced through the quiet, sharp and jagged as a rusted blade. The CEO of Ferrara International Holdings was a man who climbed to the top by stepping on necks. The bespoke suit he wore cost more than Renata's annual salary. The watch on his wrist was worth 5 years of her labor. Yet his most valuable asset was his absolute disdain for the working class. To a man like Maximiliano, everyone was beneath him. "Mr. Ferrara, I am so sorry," Renata stammered, stepping forward with trembling hands. "My daughter! She had nowhere to go. She'll stay in the kitchenette, quiet as a mouse. She won't get in the way, I swear." The kitchenette? Ferrara's eyebrow shot up. He raked his gaze over Luciana, his lip curling in thinly veiled revulsion. "You brought your spawn into my headquarters," he sneered. "Do I look like I run a daycare?" A low rumble of whispers circulated among the board members. Sebastian Rios, the company's attack dog and lead counsel, smirked. It was the look of a coward who enjoyed watching the strong crush the helpless. "Sir, please, Renata tried. "Silence." Ferrara raised a palm, cutting her off without looking away from the girl. "Step forward, child." Luciana glanced at her mother, catching the panic in Renata's eyes, a silent beg to just do as she was told and not make waves. Renata had given years of her life to this building. She scrubbed the messes these men left behind, organized their chaos, and swallowed indignities that would break most people. She did it all for the girl. Luciana took a tentative breath and walked slowly toward the center of the lion's den. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, the city below looked microscopic, irrelevant. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the recessed lighting, polished to such a high sheen that Luciana stared down at her own distorted face. Just a kid in a plaid skirt and a blue backpack, an alien invader in this cathedral of capitalism. "What do they call you?" Ferrara leaned over his desk, leather creaking. "Luciana, sir." "Luciana." He rolled the name around his mouth like it was spoiled milk. "Tell me, Luciana, what is your mother's purpose in this building?" It was bait. The girl knew it instantly. Whatever she said, he would twist it. "She works, sir," she whispered. "Works?" Ferrara barked out a harsh laugh. "You call scrubbing our toilets work? Picking up the trash we leave behind is barely a vocation." A few suits chuckled, others studied their shoes, uncomfortable but too spineless to speak up. "It's honest work, sir." Her voice was steady, silencing the room instantly. Ferrara's gaze sharpened. He wasn't used to backtalk, especially not from the offspring of the help. "Honest work?" He stood up slowly. He towered over her, casting a long shadow. "Your mother's monthly paycheck wouldn't cover my dinner tab, and you think you can lecture me on integrity?" "Maximiliano," a cool female voice cut in from across the table. Helena Dubo, the French venture capitalist there to close a multi-million-dollar deal, looked unimpressed. "Perhaps we should focus on business. The paperwork can wait." Ferrara didn't blink, his eyes locked on the girl. He'd found a new toy to break. "Tell me, little scholar, are you smart? Do you get gold stars at your little public school?" Luciana stayed silent, eyes on the floor. Just like her mother taught her. "Keep your head down. Don't be a target, survive." "I asked you a question," Ferrara snapped. "Yes, sir." "I get good grades." "In what?" "Everything, sir." A ripple of amusement went through the suits. Sebastian Rios leaned in, a malicious glint in his eye. Everything? Even languages? Yes, sir. And just what languages do you speak, Einstein? Ferrara crossed his arms, his grin widening. Luciana hesitated. She knew the truth would only invite more ridicule, but lying was a sin she couldn't commit. Her mother had taught her that, too. Painful truths beat pretty lies every time. I handle Spanish, English, French, German, and Arabic, sir. You could hear a pin drop in that boardroom. Then, Maximiliano Ferrara did the last thing anyone anticipated. He threw his head back, bellowing a laugh so loud it practically rattled the glass walls. It was a rich man's laugh, dripping with scorn, disbelief, and sheer disgust that a nobody like her would dare make such a claim. 5 languages, he wheezed, wiping his eyes. Did you hear that? The Helps kid is a linguistic prodigy. The suits around the table chuckled right along with him. Better to be a lackey than a target. Safer to join the bully than stand alone. Renata wanted to rush to her little girl, but her legs felt like lead. She choked back the tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't crack. Not in this shark tank. Mr. Ferrara, she started, voice trembling. Elena Dubois cut in, her tone sharp. I think we have had quite enough of this. But Ferrara was just getting started. A twisted little light bulb went off in his head. He smirked, strutting over to the conference table to grab a stack of files. These were the heavy hitters, contracts for the massive international merger scheduled for this afternoon. Top-tier translators had charged a fortune to prep these papers in 5 different tongues. All right then, little Miss Genius. Ferrara flapped the paperwork in Luciana's face. Maximiliano, stop, Elena warned, trying to de-escalate. Quiet, he barked, not even glancing her way. He stared at the girl like a wolf cornering a rabbit. I'll give you $1 million if you can translate these. The room gasped. Offering that kind of cash to a child? Sebastian Rio grinned from ear to ear. He saw the play immediately. It was a setup designed for total humiliation. The kid would fail, look stupid, and her mother would learn the hard way. Never bring your baggage to the office. We have files here in English, French, German, Arabic, and Japanese. Ferrara listed off. Read them, translate them, and the money is yours. $1 million, cash, on the spot. That is not fair, Renata finally snapped. She is just a child imagining things. Ferrara ignored the mother entirely. Well, Luciana? Or are you a liar? Luciana finally lifted her head, engaging for the first time since walking in. She locked eyes with the CEO. No fear, no shame, just something the big boss hadn't encountered in years. Pure grit. I was not lying to you, sir, Luciana said, her voice steady as a rock. But you added Japanese to the list. I told you I speak Arabic, not Japanese. Ferrara's smirk twitched. Guess you lose by default then. Tough break, kid. I can still try, though. Luciana held out an open palm. Hand them over. The executives started whispering. They wanted a breakdown, not bravery. They were not ready for a janitor's kid commanding the room like a seasoned CEO closing a merger. Ferrara actually paused. He looked unsure for a split second, but his massive ego would not let him back down. Suit yourself. He shoved the pile at her with a sneer. You have 5 minutes. Luciana grabbed the stack. Her hands were steady now. A switch had flipped. The scared kid was gone. She scanned the first page, standard English. It was a dense investment agreement. Equity splits, financial guarantees, the boring stuff. She started reading out loud. The suits barely listened at first. They were just waiting for the stuttering, the confusion, the inevitable failure. But the words did not stumble, they flowed. She was not just reading, she was sight-translating into Spanish, breaking down legal jargon so clearly that Elena Dubois sat up straight in her chair. Hold on, the French investor cut in. Go back. What was that about the termination clause, Luciana? She repeated the line, throwing in a legal nuance the expensive lawyers in the room had completely missed. Next up was the French file. Luciana locked eyes with Elena and started reciting in flawless Parisian French. Elena looked like she had seen a ghost. Her pronunciation, she whispered in her mother tongue. It is impeccable. Luciana offered a tiny smirk and kept translating back to Spanish. Third file, German. A dry technical report regarding cross-border wire transfers. She breezed through it. Her accent was so crisp that Karl Brenner, the German banking consultant, actually took off his glasses to stare. Where on earth did you pick up German? He asked in his native tongue. My neighbor was from Berlin, sir, Luciana replied, not missing a beat in German. She taught me since I was a baby. She always said words are bridges between worlds. Fourth document, Arabic. It was a letter of intent from Omar al-Rashid, the tycoon they were supposed to video conference with later that day. Luciana picked up the sheet, scanning the script from right to left. When she spoke, her voice dropped into the rhythmic, throaty melody of the desert tongue, sounding like she'd been born to it. Thousands of miles away, Omar al-Rashid shot up from his desk, nearly knocking over his webcam. The preliminary meeting was supposed to be routine, but this? "Who is this child?" he demanded in fluent Arabic. Without looking up from the page, Luciana fired back in the same dialect, "The cleaner's daughter. And might I add, Mr. al-Rashid, your correspondence is impeccable. The section regarding trust in business partnerships, particularly moving. You could hear a pin drop in that boardroom." Maximiliano Ferrara's smirk had vanished completely. His expression shifted from shock to something much darker, twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated menace. He was being embarrassed in his own house, but there was one card left to play. The Japanese file, the one language she'd already confessed was Greek to her. Ferrara saw the opening and pounced. "The last one," he said, smoothing his tie to hide the tremble in his hands. "Japanese. You said yourself you don't speak a word of it. Guess the little circus act ends here." Luciana looked down. The intricate strokes stared back at her, an impenetrable wall of ink. The air in the room grew heavy. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the silent, desperate hope radiating from her mother in the corner. She felt Ferrara's sneer burning into her skin, clashing with the stunned awe of the global investors. Then, she did the unthinkable. She walked calmly across the plush carpet, stopping directly in front of Yuki Tanaka. Drawing on hours of documentary footage, she executed a flawless, deep bow. "Tanaka-san, I do not speak your language, but I have spent years studying your people's ways. I know that in your tradition, the wisdom to admit ignorance is just as vital as the display of knowledge. I humbly ask that you teach me to read this, perhaps not today, but in the future." This silence wasn't tense, it was reverent. Yuki Tanaka rose from her leather chair with deliberate grace. There was a glimmer in her eyes, respect, maybe even kinship. "In Japan," she said, her Spanish accented but soft, "we have a concept. Gambaru. It means to endure, to strive until the very end, to give every ounce of your spirit even when victory is not guaranteed." She turned her gaze to Ferrara, her look so withering the CEO actually took a step back. "This child has shown more Gambaru in 5 minutes than any executive I have met in 20 years of trade." Elena Dubois stood up to join her. "I completely agree." "That was extraordinary," Elena added. Carl Brenner nodded vigorously. "Never seen anything like it." From the giant monitor, Omar al-Rashid's voice boomed like thunder. "Mr. Ferrara, you wagered $1 million. She handled 4 out of 5 flawlessly and navigated the 5th with diplomacy. I'd say she earned it." Ferrara looked around frantically. The sharks he thought were on his side were now circling him. The trap he'd set for a little girl had snapped shut on his own leg. "This is absurd!" His voice shook, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. "It was a joke!" "You think I'm actually handing over $1 million to a street rat?" Elena Dubois narrowed her eyes. "A joke? Shaming a child in front of global partners is your idea of humor, Mr. Ferrara?" "This is my company." Ferrara slammed his fist on the mahogany table. "I decide what's funny. Me." Sebastian Rios tried to step in, raising a nervous hand. "Maybe we should take a 5-minute recess?" "Nobody asked you!" Ferrara screamed at his own counsel. In the center of the storm stood Luciana, clutching the papers to her chest like a shield. She glanced at her mother by the door, tears streaming silently down the woman's face. They were tears of pride, sure, but laced with terrified anticipation. They both knew the score. Men like Ferrara didn't get embarrassed. They got even. It didn't matter what the board thought. It didn't matter what was fair. Retribution was coming. It was only a matter of when. Yet, as the afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass, bathing the room in gold, Luciana Vega had achieved the impossible. She had made a titan bleed, and though she didn't know it yet, this was merely the prologue. Somewhere in that tower of steel and glass, eyes were watching, eyes that held secrets capable of toppling empires. And that person had just found the very weapon they'd been hunting for years. The fallout, however, hit faster than Renata could have nightmares about. That very evening, as mother and daughter trudged back to their tiny apartment on the outskirts, Renata's phone buzzed. Company ID. Her heart skipped a beat, then plummeted. Mrs. Vega. The voice was ice-cold, corporate robotic. This is Human Resources. We are informing you that your services at Ferrara International Holdings are no longer required. You may collect your severance check tomorrow. The line clicked dead before Renata could even draw a breath. Luciana watched her mother crumble. The dam broke, tears flowing freely as her shoulders slumped under an invisible, crushing weight. Mom? She reached out a small hand. Don't, Renata whispered, pulling away slightly. Not now, please. They walked the rest of the way in silence, the distance between them growing with every step. The silence hanging between them was heavier than any argument could have been. With every step toward home, the lump in Luciana's throat swelled, choking her. This was all on her. That one split second of courage had cost them their livelihood, their only lifeline. Their apartment greeted them in its usual gloom. Renata didn't bother with the light switch. She just slumped into the lone dining chair and buried her face in her hands. 15 years, she whispered into her palms. 15 years I slaved away in that place, taking whatever they dished out. And it's gone in a single afternoon. Mom, I didn't mean to. I know you didn't mean to. Renata's voice cracked, sharp and sudden. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but there was something else behind them, a raw desperation Luciana had never witnessed before. But we have nothing left, Luciana, do you get that? 0. Rent is due in 2 weeks. The savings jar is empty, and I don't exactly have recruiters lining up at the door. How are we going to survive? Luciana stood there mute. She didn't have a plan. She stood frozen in the center of the cramped living room, her mother's words piercing her chest like shards of ice. I should have kept my mouth shut, she finally managed to say. I should have just let him humiliate me and left it at that. Renata took a shuddering breath, trying to pull herself together. No, honey. What you did, it was brave. Incredible, really. But the world doesn't always reward the brave. Sometimes the people in charge just crush anyone who dares to stand up to them. It's not fair. God knows it's not fair. The quiet returned, heavier now. Luciana crossed the small space and wrapped her arms around her mother. Renata collapsed into her daughter's shoulder, sobbing out the fear and frustration she'd been bottling up for hours. Years, really. We'll figure this out, Luciana whispered into her hair. I don't know how yet, but we will. I promise. Renata didn't answer. She just kept weeping. The days that followed were some of the bleakest Luciana had ever known. Renata was out the door before the sun came up, hunting for work anywhere that might take a warm body. Diners, retail shops, janitorial services, but every door slammed shut with the same refrain. No openings. What Renata didn't realize was that Maximiliano Ferrara had been busy making phone calls. He'd leveraged every ounce of his influence to make sure no business in town would touch the mother of the girl who dared to embarrass him. It was vengeance, plain and simple, quiet, effective, and utterly heartless. Luciana kept showing up for school, but she wasn't really there. She'd stare out the window during lectures, imagining her mother trudging through the heat, knocking on doors that were rigged to stay shut. Luciana Vega, are you with us? The teacher's sharp tone snapped her back to reality. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on her. Yes, ma'am, sorry. Then perhaps you can provide the answer to the question I just asked. Luciana hadn't heard a word, but her brain kicked into high gear. She scanned the board, deconstructed the equation, and crunched the numbers in a split second. 42, ma'am. The teacher blinked, caught off guard. Correct. But try to stay in the room with the rest of us, Miss Vega. Luciana nodded, but she was already drifting away again. She had to find a way to help. She had to fix the mess she'd made. A week post-termination. They were in the danger zone. The fridge was bare, bills were stacking up like kindling, and Renata had developed a cough. A deep, rattling sound that got worse when the sun went down. It's just a cold, she'd dismiss whenever Luciana asked. Don't fuss. But Luciana was fussing. She watched her mother fade, the dark circles under her eyes deepening like bruises. Every jobless day chipped away another piece of her hope. That was the breaking point. Luciana made a choice. She waited until her mother's breathing evened out, then booted up their ancient desktop. The internet connection was sluggish, but it was alive. She scoured the web for freelance translation gigs, platforms where people needed documents flipped into other languages. She had no degree, no certifications, just her fluency and a desperate need to survive. She set up a profile under a pseudonym. She couldn't use her real identity. Child labor laws were clear about minors working on these sites, but laws didn't put food on the table. Regulations didn't pay the landlord. Her first gig was tiny, translating a local diner's menu from Spanish to English. The pay was peanuts, but Luciana attacked it with the same intensity she'd shown in Ferrara's boardroom. The client left a glowing review, and suddenly the tide turned. Inquiries started rolling in. Legal contracts, business correspondence, high-stakes emails. The assignments got harder, but Luciana didn't blink. She typed away until the early morning hours while her mother slept just a room away. Then she'd drag herself up at the crack of dawn for school. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, but every dollar earned went straight into a bank account she'd opened using the ID of an older neighbor who owed her mom a solid. Weeks blurred by. Renata started noticing things she couldn't quite add up. The fridge was miraculously full and the lights stayed on, but whenever Renata asked how, Luciana spun wild tales about finding lucky coins on the sidewalk or charity from the lady next door. One evening, Renata finally cornered her. "Luciana, stop. I need you to tell me what is actually going on. Where is this cash coming from?" Luciana hesitated. Lying to her mother felt awful, but she knew honesty was a luxury they couldn't afford. If Renata knew the truth, she'd shut it down immediately. And then what? They'd starve? "It's just odd jobs," she finally lied. "Helping classmates with their essays. It's totally above board, Mom, I swear." Renata studied her daughter's face in silence. A mother's intuition told her there were missing pieces, but she also saw a girl desperately trying to keep their sinking ship afloat the only way she knew how. "Just promise me you aren't doing anything dangerous." "I promise." It was a technicality, really. Working herself into the ground wasn't safe, but it wasn't a crime scene either. Of course, faking her birth date to land gigs was against the law, but Luciana had decided that survival outweighed the rules. She couldn't have been more wrong. The reckoning arrived exactly 1 month after her mother lost her job. Luciana was mid-lecture when the principal marched in, looking like someone had died. "Luciana Vega, gather your things and come with me." A wave of hushed gossip swept through the room as she pushed back her chair. The walk to the office felt like a death march, the familiar corridor suddenly stretching out into an endless, menacing tunnel. Waiting inside were a man and a woman wearing the kind of blank professional masks that gave absolutely nothing away. "Luciana, these agents are from Child Protective Services," the principal explained. "They need to ask you a few things." Luciana's stomach dropped through the floor. "Miss Vega," the man began, his voice devoid of emotion, "we have received an anonymous tip regarding your domestic circumstances. The report alleges you are engaged in illegal employment and that your mother lacks the financial means to provide for you." "That's not," Luciana started, but he cut her off. "We also have logs suggesting you've been using fraudulent identities to circumvent age restrictions on freelancing platforms." The woman leaned in. "Is this accurate?" The walls of the small office felt like they were crushing Luciana. Someone had turned her in. Someone who knew every detail of her operation. Ferrara. It had to be him. Getting her mother fired wasn't enough. He had waited in the shadows, watching, only to strike at their most vulnerable point. "We need to speak with your mother immediately," the man stated. "And depending on our findings, we may need to explore alternative custody arrangements." Alternative custody. Luciana couldn't breathe. "You want to take me away from her?" "That isn't our goal," the woman replied, though her tone lacked any real reassurance. "We just need to verify you're in a safe environment." "My mother is the safest place on earth," Luciana shot back. Tears stung her eyes, but she locked her jaw, refusing to let them fall. "She's given up everything for me. If I broke the rules, I did it to help us, not because she made me." "We understand this is stressful," the man droned, "but protocol is protocol." Renata burst into the school 30 minutes later. The moment she stepped into the office and saw the badges, the color drained from her face. As she listened to the charges, her eyes welled up, but when she realized they were threatening to take her child, something inside her shattered. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "She was just trying to help. Put this on me. It's all my fault. Punish me, just leave her out of it." "Mrs. Vega, this isn't about punishment," the man interrupted. "We're here to assess the situation." "The situation," Renata snapped, raising her voice, "is that I was wrongfully terminated. I lost my job because my daughter outsmarted the most powerful ego in the entire company. And he's been systematically destroying our lives ever since. You should be investigating him, not us." "Ma'am, please, calm down." "You don't understand a damn thing," Renata sobbed. You don't know what it's like to walk the streets begging for work while your kid is hungry. You don't know what it's like to watch a child stay up all night just to keep a roof over our heads. You don't know anything." Luciana rushed over and wrapped her arms around her mother. They clung to each other, weeping, holding on as if the entire world was trying to pry them apart. Because, essentially, it was. "We'll need to conduct a home inspection," the man stated coldly, "and we need to interview Luciana alone." "Standard procedure. You are not separating us," Renata said, her voice turning to steel through the tears. "Nobody is talking about separation just yet," the woman said, trying to de-escalate. "Just yet?" Renata repeated the words like they were venom. "Did you hear that, Luciana? Just yet, like it's only a matter of time, like the decision is already made." "Mom," Luciana whispered, "it's going to be okay. We'll show them we're a family. We'll show them the truth." "The truth?" Renata murmured, the bitterness rising in her throat. "The truth is a luxury, honey. People like us don't get the truth. We just get whatever story the rich decide to write for us." That isolated interrogation felt less like an hour and more like a lifetime for Luciana. They dissected her existence, probing into her mother's habits, their apartment, the contents of their fridge, her nightmares. Every syllable she uttered was scrutinized, scribbled down, and weighed. "Has your mother ever hurt you?" "Never. She is the gentlest soul I know." "Do you feel safe in that house?" "I feel safe because she is there." "Why the online work, Luciana?" She hesitated, balancing the risk of the truth against the weight of the lie. Honesty could dig the hole deeper, but deceit was exactly what had landed her in this chair. "Because my mother was working herself into an early grave hunting for jobs that didn't exist. Because we were starving. Because I was the only one who could fix it, and languages are the only currency I have." "Did you know it was illegal?" "I knew it was survival." The caseworker stared at her for a long, uncomfortable silence. Her eyes held something Luciana couldn't quite read. Pity, perhaps? Judgment? Likely both. "Luciana, do you know who filed the anonymous report against your family?" "I think so." "Who?" "Maximiliano Ferrara. The man who fired my mother. The man who promised me $1 million to translate his documents and then laughed in my face when I delivered." The official scribbled furiously. "That is a very serious allegation." "It is the truth." When the door finally opened, mother and daughter collided, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. "They aren't taking you," Luciana whispered fiercely into her mother's ear. "I won't let them, my brave girl." Renata kissed her hairline. "My little warrior." They walked out of the school blind to the world, missing the black luxury sedan parked across the street and the man watching them with a predator's grin. Sebastian Rios rolled down the tinted window and dialed. "Mr. Ferrara, it went exactly to script. Child Protective Services is involved. It is just a matter of time before the kid gets swallowed by the foster system." Ferrara's voice purred through the speaker. "Excellent. No one humiliates me and walks away. Absolutely no one. And the mother? She is already broken, jobless, penniless, and soon childless. Let her simmer in that for now. What if our involvement leaks?" Ferrara let out a soft, dark chuckle. "Who believes a cleaning lady over a titan of industry? No one. That is the privilege of the throne, Sebastian. We do as we please. The world simply looks away." The line went dead. Sebastian started the engine and glided away, leaving the two fragile figures walking toward a terrifying unknown. But neither man realized they had an audience. Someone had bugged Sebastian's phone months ago, waiting for a moment precisely like this. Someone who held the keys to all of Maximiliano Ferrara's skeletons, and that someone had just decided the waiting game was over. A storm was brewing in the shadows of Ferrara Tower, and once it broke, the landscape would be permanently altered. Don Aurelio Montero had spent 73 years mastering one cold fact. True power isn't loud. It is silent. Seated in his unlisted office in the city center, he played the recording of Sebastian and Maximiliano for the third time. Every single word cemented a suspicion he had harbored for years. His nephew had mutated into a monster. Because yes, Maximiliano was his blood, the son of his late sister, whom Aurelio had raised as his own after she died of a mystery illness the doctors could never explain. He had given the boy the finest education, the open doors, the connections. He taught him the art of the deal, only to watch Maximiliano twist those lessons into an empire built on cruelty. "Don Aurelio," the voice of his assistant, Esperanza Castillo, cut through the gloom. "The background checks are done. She placed a thick dossier on the mahogany desk. She was efficient, invisible, and lethal in her competence. She had been with him for decades, guarding secrets that could topple regimes. "What is the verdict on the child?" Aurelio asked, eyes still on the wall. "Luciana Vega, a prodigy. Flawless academic record, proven fluency in 5 languages. Her mother, Renata Vega, 15 years of service at Ferrara International before being wrongfully terminated last month. And the anonymous tip? We traced the burner phone. Cell towers pinged it right inside Ferrara Tower. Legal department floor, to be precise. Sebastian." Aurelio breathed the name like a curse. "There is more," Esperanza added. "The mother is ill. It started as a simple cough, but it is deteriorating. Our sources at the community clinic logged 3 visits in 2 weeks. Doctors are flagging severe bronchitis, likely tipping into pneumonia. She desperately needs medication that she can't afford." Aurelio squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the harsh reality. The mental image of Renata trudging through downpours to find work, getting sicker by the day while her daughter slaved away until the early hours just to keep the lights on, sent a sharp pang of remorse through his chest. He was the architect of the beast currently tearing their lives apart. "What's the status on the Child Protective Services file?" "The court hearing is set for 7 days from now. If they flag the living situation as unfit, Luciana gets ripped away from her mother and thrown into the foster care system. And the caseworkers? That's where it gets dirty." Esperanza slid another folder across the mahogany desk. "The lead official, Rodrigo Paredes, has a paper trail linking him to shell companies owned by Ferrara Holdings. He's pulling in a monthly consulting retainer with 0 work to show for it. It's a payoff, plain and simple." Aurelio gave a slow, grave nod. "So, Maximiliano owns the referee. Looks like it. The gavel might as well have dropped already." He pushed himself up from the leather chair and paced over to the floor-to-ceiling glass. The Ferrara sky race glittered on the horizon, a steel and glass shrine to a man with no soul. For years, Aurelio had just stood by, watching the rot spread from the sidelines. He had built the empire from scratch 40 years ago, only to hand the keys to his nephew when his body started giving out. That signature on the transfer deed was the single greatest regret of his life. Sure, Maximiliano had supercharged the profits and expanded their reach, but he had also turned a respectable business into a criminal enterprise. Greasing palms, crushing rivals, bleeding employees dry. And now, hunting down a destitute mother and child just because his fragile ego took a hit. "Esperanza," Aurelio said, keeping his gaze fixed on the city skyline. "I need you to set something up." "Name it, sir." "Get me a sit-down with the girl, Luciana Vega." Trudging home from school, Luciana felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Someone was tailing her, staying back, blending in, knowing exactly how to remain unseen. But recent events had sharpened her senses to a razor's edge. That is what happens when you live with a target on your back. She picked up the pace. The footsteps behind her matched her rhythm. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Probably another one of Ferrara's goons. Just another pawn in his sick little war. She thought about bolting, but fear made her knees feel like jelly. "Luciana Vega?" A woman's voice cut through the air. She spun around, bracing for a fight. An older woman approached, palms open to show she wasn't armed. "Who are you?" Luciana took a defensive step back. "I'm Esperanza Castillo. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." "Help?" Luciana let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "The last person who said that called the cops on us 5 minutes later. I get why you're wary, but my employer wants to speak with you. He knows exactly what Maximiliano Ferrara has been putting you and your mom through, and he has the power to actually stop it." "Who is he?" "Aurelio Montero. He used to own Ferrara International before. Luciana blinked, confused. "The old owner? But isn't Ferrara his nephew?" "Aurelio built that company. He handed it down when he retired, but he never dreamed it would turn into this, and he wants to fix it." Esperanza's face softened, a mix of sorrow and resolve in her eyes. "Because he's watched his nephew destroy people for years. He saw how Maximiliano treated you in that boardroom, and frankly, he's ashamed to share the same DNA. And because he thinks you've got something he lost a long time ago." "Like what?" "The guts to stand up to a bully." They met later that day at a hole-in-the-wall diner on the outskirts of town. Luciana had demanded neutral ground with witnesses, and Aurelio agreed without blinking. When he walked in, Luciana did a double-take. She had been expecting some terrifying corporate titan. Instead, she saw a frail old man shuffling forward, his eyes weary but warm, wearing a smile that didn't feel fake. I appreciate you meeting with me. Aurelio lowered himself into the booth with the caution of someone with bad joints. I know you have zero reason to trust anyone with my last name. I don't, Luciana said flatly, but I'm also out of options. Straight to the point. I respect that. Aurelio flagged down a waitress and ordered 2 hot cocos before turning back to her. Do you know who I am? Your assistant filled me in. You started the company. Ferrara's your nephew. It's deeper than that. I raised him. When my sister passed, Maximiliano was only 8. I took him in, paid for the best schools, gave him the world on a silver platter. I thought I was raising a decent human being. You thought wrong. Aurelio let out a heavy sigh. Power doesn't change people, Luciana. It just reveals who they always were. And Maximiliano showed me a monster I refused to see. Cruelty, bottomless greed, and absolute contempt for anyone who isn't rich. So why didn't you stop him sooner? The question hit Aurelio like a physical blow. It was the same question that haunted him at 3 a.m. Cowardice, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Shame. Denial. I kept telling myself it was just gossip, wild exaggeration. I couldn't believe the boy I raised had turned into such a monster. Then I watched you in that boardroom. Seeing my nephew get a kick out of shaming a young girl in front of a crowd, I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. You were there? Actually, I have a back door into the company's entire surveillance grid. I never really let go of the reins, kept it as a failsafe, though I prayed I'd never have to pull the trigger. Luciana let that sink in. Wait, you saw everything? Every second. I watched you translate those files with a proficiency that takes experts a lifetime to master. I saw you stand your ground against a man who ends careers with a snap of his fingers. And when that Japanese contract landed on the table, you had the wisdom to admit you were stumped and the grace to ask for guidance. That takes guts. A thin sheen of tears glazed over her eyes. I witnessed a brilliant young woman being treated like dirt by a man unworthy of polishing her boots. Just then, the server set down the hot chocolate. She cupped her hands around the mug, soaking in the warmth. What's your angle? She finally asked. I want to help you, and your mother. How? Aurelio pulled a thick envelope from his inner coat pocket. There's enough cash here to cover your mom's medical bills. I know she's ill. I know she needs prescriptions you guys can't afford. Luciana stared at the packet but kept her hands in her lap. What's the catch? Nothing. Nobody gives something for nothing. Aurelio smiled, genuinely impressed. Sharp kid, you're right. There's always a motive. Mine is atonement. I've spent years letting my nephew wreck lives while I sat back and counted my dividends. Helping you won't scrub my record clean, but maybe it stops the bleeding. Maybe it stops him from doing it again. There's more to it. Luciana locked eyes with him. You want something other than a clear conscience. Aurelio went quiet for a long beat. He finally gave a slow nod. I want to take Maximiliano down, not just for what he did to you, but for the bribes, the rigging, the people he's crushed over the years. But I can't do it solo. I need an ally I can trust, someone he can't buy, someone Maximiliano would never see coming. Me? Luciana almost laughed in his face. I'm a kid. I have zero clout, zero money. I've got nothing. You have assets worth more than cash. You have the truth. You have your story, your raw talent, and your nerve. People are already talking. The investors in that room haven't shut up about the girl who humiliated Ferrara on his own turf. Talking? Elena Dubois, the French investor, pulled the plug on all her deals with Ferrara Holdings. Omar al-Rashid followed suit immediately. Carl Brenner is getting cold feet. And Yuki Tanaka just published a piece in a Japanese business journal about recognizing genius regardless of pedigree. Luciana felt a weird flutter in her chest. Hope? Pride? She couldn't tell. So, what's the plan? For now, nothing. Just take the help. Let me cover your mother's treatment. Let me shield you both from the fallout. The fallout? Aurelio's face went grim. The child services hearing. Maximiliano bribed a caseworker. The verdict is already in. They're going to separate you from your mother. The room spun around her. How do you know that? Because I have eyes everywhere, and I know how my nephew operates. He won't stop until he breaks you completely. Tears burned the corners of her eyes, but she swallowed them down. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. Can you stop him? I can try. But I need time, and I need you to trust me. Luciana stared at the envelope on the table. She thought about her mother's hacking cough echoing through the night, getting worse by the hour. She thought about the hearing looming over them like a hurricane. She remembered every door slammed in her face, every dead-end dream, and recalled something her mother used to say, "When you've hit rock bottom, an outstretched hand is a bridge." She grabbed the envelope. "All right," she said. "I'm trusting you, but if you stab me in the back, if you hurt my mom in any way, I will find a way to end you. I don't know how, but I will." Aurelio looked at her with a mix of awe and respect. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm betting on you." That night, Luciana came home to find her mother sitting in the dark, sobbing. "Mom?" She rushed to her side. "What happened?" Renata held up a crumpled paper. It was official correspondence from Child Protective Services. They'd moved the hearing up. Her voice was barely audible. "It's the day after tomorrow. They claim they have enough evidence to prove our home is unfit." The floor dropped out from under Luciana. Aurelio said he needed time, but time had just run out. "Mom, look at me." She squeezed her mother's hands tight. "I met someone today. Someone who wants to help. Someone with the muscle to fight Ferrara." "Who?" "The man who built his company. His own uncle." Renata stared at her, disbelief written all over her face. "Ferrara's uncle? And you trust him?" "I don't know if I do, but we have to try. This is our only shot." The sentence hung in the air until Renata hacked, a wet, ugly sound that cut the conversation dead. It was a deep, agonizing cough, and this time it brought up something that made Luciana's blood run cold. Red. The rag her mother pressed to her lips was stained crimson. "It's nothing, Mom." Renata tried to ball up the tissue, hiding the evidence. "It's just... Don't lie to me." Luciana's voice cracked, tears already spilling. "How long have you been hiding this?" Silence was the only answer Renata gave, but her guilty eyes screamed the truth. "We're going to the ER. Now. We can't afford it." Luciana whipped out the envelope Aurelio had forced on her. She tore the flap. It held more cash than they'd seen in a decade. "We can afford it now." Later, amidst the chaos of the Central Hospital emergency room, Luciana stepped away to make a call while doctors swarmed her mother. "Mr. Aurelio, it's Luciana. Mom is in bad shape, and they moved the hearing up. The day after tomorrow." Aurelio's voice tightened on the line. "They're panicking. Maximiliano is fast-tracking everything to bury us. So, what's the move?" The line went quiet for a beat before the old man spoke, sounding steadier than before. "Get ready, kid. We're pulling a stunt my nephew won't see coming. We're going public. Every ugly truth broadcast to the world." The waiting room reeked of ammonia and hopelessness. Luciana had spent this night glued to a hard plastic chair, watching the clock tick, terrified of what was happening behind those swinging white doors. Eventually, the doctors came out to confirm the nightmare: severe pneumonia. She needed a bed, expensive IVs, and zero stress. It was the price of poverty. Weeks spent trudging through downpours hunting for work. Sleepless nights and the cortisol spike of living with a target on your back had shattered her immune system. "She's a fighter," said Dr. Solis, offering a kind look that didn't pay the bills. "But she needs to be admitted for at least a week. If this spreads deeper into her lungs, we're looking at permanent damage, or worse." A week. The court date was in 2 days. Luciana felt like the cosmos was playing a sick joke on them. Every time they clawed their way toward a break, the floor fell out from under them. Her pocket buzzed. A text from Esperanza. "Don Aurelio needs you. Urgent." Sending coordinates. Luciana glanced back at the room where her mother lay, tethered to beeping monitors. Leaving felt like betrayal, but staying meant waiting for the axe to fall. She begged a nurse to keep an eye on things and bolted into the daylight. The address led her to the old quarter, a crumbling part of the city Luciana rarely visited. No corporate signage. Just a heavy, dark wood door that swung open before her knuckles could graze it. Esperanza stood in the shadows. "This way?" No small talk. They climbed a narrow staircase to an office that smelled of old money and history. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the room, flanked by antique maps in gilded frames. Aurelio sat behind a massive oak desk looking grim. But the real surprise was the audience. Luciana froze in the doorway, her breath hitching as she realized who else was in the room. Elena Dubois, the French venture capitalist, sat poised in a leather armchair looking effortlessly chic. Omar al-Rashid stood by the window, the Arab tycoon's serious gaze fixed on her. And Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese executive, sat near the desk, hand resting protectively on a sleek briefcase. "What is all this?" Luciana asked, her voice betraying her nerves. "Take a seat," Aurelio commanded gently. "We're short on time." She sat, though her fight-or-flight instinct was screaming at her to run. Elena spoke first, her English crisp and laced with a sophisticated accent. After that display in the boardroom, you made quite an impression on us. A young girl staring down a predator like Ferrara, showing instincts seasoned CEOs lack. It was remarkable, but more importantly, Omar's deep voice rumbled across the room. It was a wake-up call. Ferrara dropped his mask that day, which prompted us to look under the hood of his operation. You investigated him? Luciana looked at Aurelio, bewildered. Global Capital has reached that I don't, Aurelio said. By the time I called them, they were already digging into Ferrara Holdings, and the findings are catastrophic. Yuki clicked her briefcase open and slid a thick dossier across the wood. Forged ledgers, rigged contracts, bribery across 6 nations, sweatshops in the supply chain, and it gets darker. He slid the thick file across the table toward Luciana. Your mom wasn't the first worker Ferrara decided to crush just because he felt like it. This is his standard operating procedure. Over the years, he's targeted dozens. People who stood up to him, refused to cook the books, or just rubbed him the wrong way. The ending is always the same. Fired, blacklisted, and their reputation set on fire so they can never work again. Luciana flipped through the pages, her eyes catching names, dates, and sworn statements. An entire catalog of broken homes and torpedoed careers. Her mother was just the latest casualty of a predator who'd been hunting without consequences for decades. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? She asked, her voice cracking. Elena's reply was bitter and sharp. Because money looks out for money. Ferrara has friends in high places, politicians, news anchors, and judges. He owns them all. Anyone who tried to blow the whistle was gagged before they could make a sound. But we have numbers now, Omar added, and we have an ace up our sleeve he never saw coming. What's that? You? Aurelio leaned in close. You're a global phenomenon, Luciana. That footage from the boardroom hit the web 3 days ago. What? Luciana felt like she'd been punched in the gut. How did... I leaked it, Aurelio confessed, not looking the least bit sorry. It was a calculated move. I knew it would make Ferrara come after you harder, but the public needed to see exactly what kind of man my nephew is. Esperanza tapped a remote, bringing the wall-mounted screen to life. The footage played back the nightmare exactly as Luciana remembered it. There was Ferrara mocking her, the $1 million bet, her flawless response in 4 languages, and the quiet dignity she showed while speaking Japanese. But the real shocker was the view count ticking upward below the frame. 47 million views. In just 3 days, the whole world was talking about her. You're trending in 17 countries, Elena said. Reporters from every corner of the globe want an interview. But more importantly, they've started digging into Ferrara's past. Luciana stared at the screen, her brain refusing to compute the scale of it all. Her lowest moment had transformed into a rallying cry. They weren't laughing at her, they were cheering for her, defending her honor and screaming for justice. Look at the comments, Yuki said, pointing to the scrolling feed of thousands of messages. They're demanding Ferrara pay up. The $1 million, everyone agrees you earned it. I don't want a dime from him, Luciana said, her voice steel. I just want him to leave my family alone. And that, Aurelio said, rising from his chair, is exactly what we're going to make happen. But we can't do it without you. What do you need me for? The press conference. We've scheduled it for tomorrow. The next few hours passed in a blur of strategy and logistics as Aurelio laid out the game plan. Tomorrow, just hours before the Child Protective Services hearing, they'd hold an international press event. The investors would drop the hammer, presenting hard proof of Ferrara's corporate crimes. Aurelio would finally step out of the shadows, reveal himself as the company's true founder, and publicly disown his nephew's actions. And Luciana, she would tell her story. Not just the boardroom incident, Aurelio clarified. Everything. Your mother's wrongful termination, the blacklisting, the bogus anonymous tip, the bribed social worker, all of it. Do you really think this will work? Luciana asked, doubt heavy in her voice. Ferrara has clout, lawyers, and connections. But he's missing the one thing we have. Omar smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Documented truth, and 47 million witnesses who are already rooting for you. Elena stepped closer and took Luciana's hands in hers. I know you're terrified. Anyone would be. But what you did in that boardroom showed more guts than most world leaders possess. You aren't fighting this battle alone, Yuki agreed with a firm nod. In Japan, we have a saying, Nana korobi ya oki. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. You've already picked yourself up more times than I can count. One more time won't break you." Luciana looked around the room, an old man seeking atonement, a French investor risking millions on principle alone, an Arab businessman who still believed in justice, a Japanese executive who valued humility over ego, and herself, just a daughter trying to save her mom. "All right," she finally said. "I'm in." That night, Luciana went back to the hospital. Her mother was awake, but frail. "Where have you been?" Renata rasped. Luciana pulled a chair up to the bedside and spilled the whole story. The viral clip, the investors backing them, the press conference strategy, and the upcoming custody hearing. By the time she finished, silent tears were streaming down Renata's face. "My brave girl," she whispered. "When did you stop being my baby and turn into a warrior? I'm still your baby, Mom. I just learned to fight for the people I love." "I'm scared," Renata admitted. "I'm terrified of what he might do to you if you challenge him in public. I'm scared too." Luciana squeezed her mother's hand. "But I'm more afraid of doing nothing and losing you, of being torn apart, of letting him win. And if this doesn't work, at least the world will know the truth. That's one thing they can't repossess." Renata's eyes fluttered shut. "Your grandmother." She believed words had physical weight. She used to say the person who controls the narrative controls the planet. "I've barely mentioned her to you. She passed away when I was just a girl, but she was in the same trade you are, a translator, fluent in 6 tongues. She was on the payroll for embassies, massive corporations, even heads of state. Yet she claimed her real talent wasn't the vocabulary. It was bridging the gap between people who couldn't hear each other." Luciana felt a sting behind her eyelids. Why hide that from me? Because when we buried her, my link to that high society life broke. I shrank into the role society carved out for me. Just another invisible set of hands scrubbing up after the wealthy. But you've got her spark, Luciana. And tomorrow, you're going to fulfill the ambition she never got to finish. How? By using your voice to shift the balance of power. The day of the press briefing broke with a steel-gray chill in the air. Luciana hadn't caught more than a wink of sleep. She'd spent the entire night rehearsing her statement, policing her tone, and wargaming potential questions. Yet, stepping into the venue, she realized no amount of practice could have braced her for the reality. The room was absolutely packed with hundreds of reporters. International news lenses were trained like weapons on a modest stage, centering on a lonely podium bristling with microphones. Esperanza had tipped her off that thousands were rallying outside. They carried signs screaming, "Justice for Luciana," and "Make Ferrara pay." The slogan, "The world is watching," was everywhere. As they marched toward the platform, Aurelio leaned in. "You ready for this?" "Not even close," Luciana confessed, "but I'm doing it regardless." The briefing kicked off with Aurelio taking the floor, finally dropping the mask to reveal himself as the original architect of Ferrara Holdings and publicly condemning his nephew's reign of corruption. The press corps erupted, shouting over one another, but Aurelio stood stone-faced, layering one piece of documented proof over another. Next, the investors took the stand. Elena detailed the cooked books and financial fraud. Omar blew the whistle on the cross-border bribery schemes. Yuki brought forward statements from former staff members discarded just like Renata. Then, the spotlight shifted to Luciana. She approached the mic, her knees knocking together, but resolved to keep the tremor out of her throat. Staring down the lens, visualizing the millions of strangers tuned in across the globe, she began. "My name is Luciana Vega. I am 11 years old. My mother cleans floors for a living. 1 month ago, a man with immense power offered me $1 million to translate files across 5 languages. She let the words hang there. You could hear a pin drop in that hall. I nailed 4 of them. The 5th was Japanese, a language I don't speak. But I didn't lie. I owned up to it and asked for the chance to learn. You know his reaction? He laughed in my face. He called it a prank, then fired my mother on the spot just for bringing me to the office." The lenses zoomed in, catching every syllable, every micro-expression, every tear that Luciana refused to shed. But firing her wasn't enough. He blacklisted her to make sure no one in the city would ever hire her again. He filed false anonymous reports to have me taken by the state. He bribed officials to guarantee we were left with absolutely nothing. She hoisted a thick folder aloft. "Here is the proof. Paper trails, audio recordings, sworn statements, everything required to expose the man behind the suit." She locked eyes with the primary camera lens. "Mr. Ferrara, if you're watching this, understand one thing. I am not afraid of you. My mother taught me that dignity isn't a commodity you can trade, and my grandmother, a woman I never met but whose blood runs through me, taught me that language is the weapon that changes the world. Her projection grew steelier with every syllable. You tried to bury us, but all you did was wake a giant that won't go back to sleep. The world knows exactly who you are now, and we have everyone's attention. The stillness following her statement hung in the air for barely 3 seconds. Then, absolute bedlam. Reporters surged from their chairs, shouting inquiries. Camera strobes went off in a blinding, rapid-fire display like pyrotechnics. Outside, the low hum of the crowd swelled into a roar so powerful it vibrated through the building's concrete walls. Luciana tuned it all out. Her gaze was locked on a monitor to the side, displaying the live feed. The viewer count was climbing vertically. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. The entire planet was witnessing the takedown. Aurelio stepped back up to the podium, commanding the room. We will take questions now, but let's keep it orderly. Raise your hands. A sea of arms shot up instantly, a forest of desperate fingers vying for attention. You, front row? Aurelio pointed to a redhead sporting press credentials from a major international network. Thank you. Victoria Campos was Global News. Mr. Montero, you claim to be the original founder of Ferrara Holdings and Maximiliano's uncle. Can you verify that lineage? Aurelio nodded grimly. I have birth certificates, guardianship papers, and bank statements tracking every cent of his education. I also have decades of family photographs to prove it. We're handing every single piece of evidence over to the relevant authorities immediately. Another hand shot up from the crowd, a bald man with a crisp British accent. Jonathan Pierce, Financial Times. Question for the investors in the room. Are you prepared to go on the record and testify against Ferrara Holdings? And have you considered the blowback for your own enterprises? Elena Dubois stepped up to the mic. We are ready to take the stand. As for the blowback, we're going to bleed cash, a lot of it. But some things carry a heavier price tag than profit margins. Integrity tops that list. Omar al-Rashid chimed in, Where I come from, honor holds more weight than gold. What we witnessed in that boardroom was the disgrace of a man who thought his wallet made him bulletproof. He was dead wrong. The grilling continued for nearly an hour. Questions about the files, the witness accounts, Ferrara's pattern of abuse. Every answer was another brick in the wall sealing off the CEO's empire. Eventually, a young, fresh-faced reporter raised her hand timidly. This question is for Luciana. How did you master so many languages at such a young age? Luciana locked eyes with the journalist. It was the first time anyone had addressed her personally since her opening statement. My mother worked from dawn till dusk. She began. Growing up, I spent a lot of time on my own, but our apartment building was a melting pot of immigrants. Mrs. Ingrid from Germany taught me her tongue while babysitting. Mr. Ahmad from Syria spun tales in Arabic while his wife cooked for us. Madame Colette, an elderly Frenchwoman on the 3rd floor, used to read poetry to me in her native language, every single afternoon. She paused, visualizing faces she hadn't seen in years. To them, I wasn't just the cleaning lady's daughter. I was just Luciana, a nosy little kid with a million questions. They shared their languages because it was the only gift they could afford to give, and I learned them because it was the only way I knew how to say thank you for their love. The silence that fell over the room felt different this time. It wasn't tension or anticipation, it was pure respect. And the English? The reporter asked softly. The web? Luciana offered a small smile. Videos, movies, music. My mom couldn't afford private tutors, but knowledge is free for anyone hungry enough to hunt for it. The press conference wrapped up just past noon. As security escorted Luciana out, her phone started vibrating like it was having a seizure. Texts from unknown numbers, social media notifications blowing up, missed calls from international area codes, but only one notification mattered. It was from Dr. Miranda Solis at the hospital. Your mother is awake. She's asking for you. Get here when you can. Luciana didn't walk. She sprinted. Inside the hospital room, Renata was sitting up, eyes glued to a small TV screen broadcasting the news. The press conference was the headline story on every single channel. My baby girl, she whispered as Luciana burst in. My little warrior. Luciana collapsed into her arms, finally letting the tears fall after holding them back for days. All the bottled-up emotion, the terror, the crushing pressure came out in heavy sobs that shook her entire frame. You did it. Renata stroked her hair. You stared down a monster and the whole world watched him blink. I was so scared, Mom, so terrified I'd fail, that none of it would matter. But you didn't fail. You've never failed, Luciana. You do everything with heart, and the heart doesn't know how to lie. Dr. Solis walked in right then, a beam of light across her face. I've got good news. The infection is retreating. If she keeps improving like this, your mother could be discharged in 4 or 5 days. Seriously? Luciana felt a wave of relief wash over her. Seriously, though she'll need total bed rest for several weeks. No stress, no worries. Renata let out a soft chuckle. That's a tall order, with a daughter who just declared war on one of the most powerful men in the country. The doctor looked at them with a spark of curiosity. I watched the broadcast. The whole hospital did. The nurses are already talking about passing a hat around to collect some funds for you two. We don't need handouts. Renata started to protest, but Luciana cut in. We need justice, doctor. And today was just the opening shot. The next few hours were a blur of ringing phones and visitors. Esperanza showed up first with game-changing news. The Attorney General has officially opened a formal investigation into Ferrara Holdings. They're combing through every document we submitted, and it gets better. 3 former employees who were too scared to talk before are now begging to testify. Then Aurelio arrived, looking dead on his feet but fueled by a new kind of adrenaline. Maximiliano has vanished. He's not at his penthouse, not at the office, not at any of his usual haunts. His lawyers claim he's weighing his legal options, but let's be real. He's running. Running. Luciana frowned. Running to where? The man holds properties across multiple borders and stashes his wealth in offshore tax havens. He has the resources to be anywhere. Then there was the matter of tomorrow's custody hearing. For the first time all week, a faint smile touched Aurelio's lips. It was off the docket. Rodrigo Paredes, the bureaucrat Maximiliano kept on his payroll, was taken into custody this morning. He spilled every secret to secure a lighter sentence. That anonymous tip filed against your family has been officially thrown out. Luciana felt the strength go out of her legs. Renata caught her, and they held each other, weeping with pure relief. It meant the state wasn't going to tear her away from her mother. It means precisely that. You two remain together, always. Yet the tranquility was short-lived. Later that night, while Luciana dozed in the armchair beside her mother's bed, her mobile buzzed. Blocked caller ID. She stared at the screen, hesitating. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, but curiosity won out. Hello, Luciana Vega. The voice on the other end was digitally altered, completely masking the speaker's identity. You have made a critical miscalculation. Who is this? Just someone privy to information even Don Aurelio lacks regarding his precious nephew? A cold shiver traced down Luciana's spine. What sort of information? Maximiliano Ferrara is not the man the world perceives. His malice stems from roots far deeper than you could possibly conceive. Roots that tangle directly with your own bloodline. My family? That makes no sense. Your grandmother, the translator. Do you truly believe her early death was an accident? Or that it was mere chance your mother ended up employed at the Ferrara Corporation? Luciana's heart hammered against her ribs, the sound deafening in her ears. What exactly are you implying? I am telling you there is a narrative you have been denied, a history binding your family to the Ferraras that spans decades. And if you wish to grasp the full truth, you must investigate where it all began. Where? Aurelio Montero's private archives. Ask him about the year he first met your grandmother. Ask him what transpired at the French embassy. Ask him why your mother never knew her father's identity. The line went dead. Luciana stood frozen, the silent phone still pressed against her cheek. The stranger's words ricocheted through her mind like echoes in a dark cavern. Her grandmother, the French embassy, her mother's missing father. What did it all mean? She glanced at Renata, who was sleeping heavily under the influence of her medication. Her mother had never spoken of her father. Luciana had always assumed the subject was too painful, a closed door she shouldn't open. But now, questions multiplied in her thoughts like a virus. Who was the man who fathered her mother? And what was her grandmother's connection to the Ferrara dynasty? And why would someone want her to uncover this specifically now? The following morning, Luciana cornered Aurelio. She found him in his study, poring over legal briefs regarding the investigation into his nephew. As soon as she walked in, he noticed the shift in her demeanor immediately. I received a call last night, she stated bluntly. Someone told me to ask you about my grandmother, the French embassy, and my mother's father. The color drained from Aurelio's face. Who called you? I do not know. The voice was masked, but they knew details. Details that made me realize there is a massive gap in the story I've been told. Aurelio sank into his leather chair, looking as if he had suddenly aged 10 years. I had hoped you would never have to carry this burden, he murmured. I wanted to help you without dragging the past into the light. What past? What truth? The old man closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they glistened with unshed tears. Your grandmother, Catalina Vega, was the most extraordinary woman I have ever encountered. She was working as a translator at the French embassy when our paths first crossed. She possessed the same light in her eyes that you do, the same passion for language, that same inner fire. He paused, the confession seemingly draining him physically. We fell in love. It was forbidden, impossible by all standards of society. I was a married man with responsibilities and a reputation to uphold, but Catalina was magnetic. I could not stay away, even though I knew the consequences. Luciana felt the floor sway beneath her. Are you telling me that you and my grandmother were involved? It lasted nearly 2 years, and that union produced a child. A daughter Catalina raised alone because I was too much of a coward to claim her publicly. My mother, Luciana whispered. My mother is your daughter. Aurelio nodded, unable to meet her gaze. Renata is my child, which means you, Luciana, are my granddaughter. Luciana's entire world collapsed and reassembled itself in a split second. Everything she thought she knew about her lineage, her history, and her own identity was a fabrication. Does my mother know? No, Catalina never told her. She made me swear to take the secret to my grave. But wait, Ferrara is your nephew. Luciana connected the dots, a growing horror washing over her. That means Ferrara is my mother's cousin. It means the man who tried to destroy us is our own flesh and blood. Yes. Aurelio finally looked up at her. Maximiliano knows nothing of this connection. No one knew, except for me and your grandmother. But the secret is out. Someone else knows, and they're weaponizing it. For what end? No clue, but we need to figure it out before the clock runs out. Luciana collapsed into the nearest chair, her brain struggling to compute the magnitude of the revelation. Aurelio Montero's granddaughter. Maximiliano Ferrara's cousin. The heir to a dynasty she didn't even know she belonged to. And somewhere out there a shadow player held all the cards, treating her life like a pawn in a game she was just learning to play. So, what's the play? She asked, her voice fracturing. Right now? Aurelio stood up, a fresh wave of resolve washing over him. We hunt down the puppet master and find out what their endgame is. They didn't get the chance. Aurelio's phone jarred the silence. It was Esperanza, sounding absolutely petrified. Mr. Montero, turn on the news, immediately. Aurelio grabbed the remote. The image that flashed on the screen sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Maximiliano Ferrara stood at a podium, wearing a smile cold enough to freeze hell over. When he spoke, the world tilted. I'm in possession of intelligence that will not only dismantle Dawn, Aurelio Montero, but exposes our little hero, Luciana Vega, as a fraud. She is a plant in a corporate coup to steal my company, and I have the receipts. Ferrara's accusation hung in the air, heavy and final as a gavel strike. Luciana felt like she had been gut-punched. All color drained from Aurelio's face. His hands shook as he watched his nephew preen for the cameras. In the next 24 hours, Ferrara continued, that shark-like grin widening, I will release documents proving Aurelio Montero has spent decades plotting a hostile takeover using his secret weapon, a child who just happens to be his illegitimate granddaughter. The word landed like a slap. Illegitimate. It stripped her of humanity, branding her existence as a mistake, a dirty smudge needing to be wiped clean. This fairy tale of David versus Goliath? Ferrara spat the words out. It is a lie, a family conspiracy designed to ruin me, and I have a witness ready to testify. The camera panned to reveal a man sitting beside him. Sebastian Rios, Ferrara's legal pit bull, the guy who did the dirty work and buried the bodies. He sat there looking twitchy but cornered into compliance. Mr. Rios, Ferrara said, turning to him, share what you know. Sebastian cleared his throat. I worked alongside Don Aurelio for years before his retirement. I witnessed private discussions where he explicitly stated his intent to seize the company back when the time was right. He spoke of a secret daughter he would eventually position as the rightful heir. Luciana looked at Aurelio, horror-struck. Is that true? No, Aurelio denied it instantly. Sebastian is lying through his teeth. The man never worked directly for me. Maximiliano hired him years after I left. Why would he say this? Because Maximiliano owns him. Rios knows where the skeletons are buried. If he doesn't play ball, he goes down with the ship. On the screen, Ferrara kept spinning his web. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., right where this girl performed her little circus act, I will present the evidence. The world will see the Monteros in Vegas for what they are, a clan of liars and manipulators. The feed cut to black. The silence in the office was suffocating. We have to act, Luciana said, voice tight. We can't let him control the narrative. It is baseless, Aurelio said, trying to project strength through a wavering voice. There is no paper trail for a conspiracy that doesn't exist, but the court of public opinion doesn't care about facts. Esperanza chimed in. Your base is shaking. People are doubting us. Social media is already lighting up with conspiracy theories. Aurelio's phone buzzed again. Elena Duba. Aurelio, I just saw the broadcast. We need a war room, now. 30 minutes later, the investors were huddled in the office, faces grim but ready for a fight. Ferrara's allegations are absurd, Omar al-Rashid said, kicking things off. Anyone with eyes can see that girl wasn't acting. Her talent is raw. But Ferrara, he has got leverage. Elena pointed out the obvious. He wouldn't go nuclear without ammunition, even if it is manufactured. Manufactured? Luciana asked. You mean fake documents? Yuki Tanaka nodded. In the corporate world, it is standard operating procedure. They forge papers that look 100% authentic but are pure fiction. The problem is disproving them. Exactly. Elena sighed. Proving a forgery is fake is infinitely harder than proving a truth is real. Luciana's phone buzzed in her pocket. Blocked number. If you want the dirt on Sebastian Rios, check the Bar Association's closed files. Case number 2847. Appearances can be deceiving. Luciana flashed the screen for the room to see. Recognize the number? That's the same mysterious caller from yesterday. Who has this kind of access to my family history? She asked. Is there a guardian angel watching out for us or just another stalker? Aurelio's brow furrowed deep. The who is irrelevant right now. Esperanza was already typing, her fingers a blur across the keyboard. All I care about is the what? She breached a few private servers Luciana hadn't even heard of. Got him. Esperanza spun the monitor around. Bar Association case number 2847. Turns out our friend Sebastian Rios was flagged years ago for cooking the books in a civil dispute. They dropped it due to insufficient evidence, naturally, but check out the footnotes. What are we looking at? The group asked. The whistleblower got spooked. Threats were made, and the charges vanished into thin air. And guess who was bankrolling the defense? Esperanza smirked. Ferrara Holdings, Aurelio whispered, the realization hitting him. Bingo. Sebastian isn't just a lawyer. He's their professional forger. He's been dirty for years, and now he's running the same play against us. Darkness settled over the skyline, mirroring the mood in the room. The team was running on adrenaline, but Luciana felt the pull of the hospital. She was torn between her duty to her sick mother and the terrifying reality that if they didn't crush Ferrara tonight, their entire resistance would crumble. I have to check on Mom, she finally announced. She's completely in the dark about all this. Go, Aurelio urged. He nodded solemnly. We'll hold the fort here. Get some rest. We need you sharp for the battle tomorrow. Don Aurelio. Luciana hesitated. She paused at the threshold. My mother still has no idea that you're her father. When are you planning to drop that bomb? The old man couldn't meet her eyes. When the dust settles, she has enough on her plate right now. Luciana shook her head. She deserves the truth, not protection. I know, and I'll tell her. You have my word? Back at the hospital, Renata was propped up, eyes glued to the evening news flickering on the tiny wall-mounted set. I caught Ferrara's press conference, she said the moment Luciana walked in. The man has zero shame. Mom, turn it off. We need to talk. Luciana pulled a chair close to the bedside and laid it all out. She spoke of Aurelio, of Catalina, and the skeletons that had been locked in the family closet for decades. Renata's face was a shifting landscape of emotion. Shock gave way to disbelief, then deep, aching grief. Aurelio Montero is my father. The words barely escaped her lips. Yes, Mom. You're his daughter. I'm his granddaughter, and that monster Ferrara? He's blood. Your cousin, my cousin." Renata shut her eyes tight against the reality. Silent tears traced paths through the wrinkles on her face. "My mother, she never said a word," she whispered. "Every time I asked about him, she'd pivot, claimed some stones are better left unturned." Luciana squeezed her hand. "Are you mad?" Renata opened her eyes, locking onto her daughter. "I don't know what I am. My whole life I thought I was a bastard child, unwanted and abandoned. And now you tell me my father is one of the wealthiest men in the city? That he watched us struggle for years and stayed silent? He was scared, Mom. Scared of dishonoring Grandma's memory, scared of making your life messy. And that makes it okay? Decades of silence while we scraped by just to eat?" Luciana didn't have a defense for that. She felt her mother's fury. She understood Aurelio's logic too, but understanding isn't the same as forgiveness. "Get him here," Renata demanded suddenly. "Right now, before the sun comes up and that vulture Ferrara tries to take the last crumbs of our dignity." Aurelio walked into the ward an hour later. Luciana stood guard in the hallway, giving them the space they needed. Through the thin door, the murmur of voices drifted out. At first measured, then rising in pitch, and finally, the unmistakable sound of weeping. 2 hours passed before the door opened. Aurelio emerged, his eyes bloodshot and swollen. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since sunset. "How did it go?" Luciana asked gently. "She's furious, hurt, confused." Aurelio slumped against the corridor wall. "She has every right. I robbed her of a father. I robbed her of a completely different life." "Did she forgive you?" "I don't know. She needs time. But she said one thing that gave me a lifeline." "What was it?" "She said that despite the mess, she's proud of you, of the woman you are. And if my influence helped shape that, even from the shadows, then maybe my mistakes weren't a total loss." Luciana felt the sting of tears. She slipped back into the room to find her mother staring out at the city lights. "Mom?" Renata turned. Her face was a map of dried tears. But beneath the sadness was something else. A look Luciana knew well because she saw it every morning in the mirror. Resolve. "We're going to finish this," Renata said, her voice steel. "Ferrara, he's my cousin, my own blood, and he's spent his life crushing the little guy, us included. Mom, you're sick. You need bed rest, not a war. I'll rest when he's ruined. Right now, I belong in the trenches with you. The doctors won't sign your discharge papers. Then we walk out the back." A weak but genuine smile broke across Renata's face. "You think you're the only one who inherited your grandmother's fire?" By the time the sun breached the horizon, a motley crew of rebels had assembled in Aurelio's high-rise office. Renata sat deep in the armchair, a blanket draped over her like armor, pale but with eyes like steel. Luciana was her anchor, gripping her hand tight, and across from them, Aurelio looked like he was seeing a ghost, struggling to process the sight of the granddaughter he missed out on now fighting in the trenches right beside him. The rest of the room was packed with suits, money men bringing cash and clout to the table, but all eyes were glued to the center monitor, staring at the game changer. "We tracked the mystery caller," Esperanza announced, cutting through the tension. "You are not going to believe this." The screen flickered to life, revealing a face that hit everyone with a jolt of recognition. She was middle-aged, but she wore features that echoed the people in this room. "Meet Camila Montero," Esperanza said, "Maximiliano Ferrara's kid sister. Turns out, she has been building a case against her own blood for years." "Ferrara has a sister?" Luciana whispered. It didn't make sense. The man had practically scrubbed her from history. Aurelio squinted at the screen, memory lane hitting him hard. "Camila. Last time I saw her, she was just a teenager. Maximiliano shipped her off the second he grabbed the company reins. Claimed it was for her own good, but we all knew the truth. She was their parents' golden child. His ego couldn't handle the competition. And now, looks like she is switching sides. Can we get a hold of her? Way ahead of you. She is already here." Camila Montero walked in with 30 minutes on the clock before Ferrara's big show. The moment she stepped through the door, Luciana saw the DNA evidence immediately. She had the same piercing eyes as Aurelio and that same rigid spine. But where Ferrara projected pure malice, Camila carried a heavy, resolved kind of sorrow. "Uncle Aurelio," she said softly, "it has been a long time. Too long." Aurelio didn't hesitate. He pulled her into a crush of an embrace. "Why the radio silence all these years?" "Because Maximiliano didn't give me a choice." He swore if I ever reached out to the family, he would burn down everything I loved. Camilla pulled back, her face hardening. But I have got nothing left to lose now. And when I saw what he did to this girl, I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows anymore. She turned to Luciana, eyes full seti. You have got guts, kid. More than any of us. You stood up to my brother when everyone else was busy looking the other way. What can you give us? Luciana didn't waste time on pleasantries. Ferrara takes the stage in less than an hour. Camilla fished a hard drive out of her purse. 23 years of dirt. Recordings, ledgers, witness statements. It proves the papers my brother is about to wave around are total forgeries. And that is just the appetizer. How did you get all this? Because Maximiliano never thought I mattered enough to be a threat. To him, I was just the weak little sister he exiled and forgot. It never crossed his mind that I was watching, waiting, and locking every single screw. Papa. Bizarre. Camilla jammed the drive into the laptop. A cascade of folders popped up on the main screen. Look here. Proof that Sebastian Rios forged those documents just 3 days ago. Metadata doesn't lie. She clicked open another directory. These are the master tapes. Maximiliano ordering hits, ruining lives, including the smear campaign he launched against Renata Vega. Renata leaned in, eyes locking onto the file names. You have him on tape, ordering my ruin? I have him on tape, ordering everything. My brother never learned discretion because he never believed anyone had the spine to challenge him. Camilla scanned the room. Maximiliano stole my family, my inheritance, my entire life. Today, I am taking something back. What exactly? Luciana asked. My dignity, and a little justice for the rest of you. The conference hall was packed to the rafters. Every major news outlet had a body in a seat. TV crews were beaming the feed to over 100 countries. Outside, the mob chanted, holding signs that read, Justice for Luciana, while the world watched. Maximiliano Ferrara marched in first, flanked by Sebastian Rios and a phalanx of high-priced suits. He wore that signature smirk, the look of a man who thinks he has won the war before the first shot is fired. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed from the podium. Today, I am pulling back the curtain on the most elaborate conspiracy this city has ever seen. He hoisted a thick binder into the air. I have proof right here that Don Aurelio Montero spent decades plotting a hostile takeover, weaponizing a young girl for media sympathy. A girl who turns out to be his illegitimate granddaughter, the byproduct of a sordid affair with the help. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Sebastian Rios, my legal counsel, witnessed these machinations firsthand and is prepared to testify under oath. Sebastian leaned toward the mic, but before he could utter a syllable, the double doors crashed open. Luciana led the charge. Behind her, Renata marched with a steady rhythm, refusing to let her illness slow her down. Aurelio followed with the international backers, but it was the woman bringing up the rear who drained the blood from Ferrara's face. Camila Montero! Camila! Ferrara's voice cracked, his composure shattering. What the hell are you doing here? I'm here to drag the truth out into the light, brother. The same ugly truth you've spent 23 years trying to suffocate. Camilla took the podium, claiming the space with a gravity that stripped her brother of his earlier command. For the record, I am Camila Montero. You know me as Maximiliano Ferrara's younger sister. What you don't know is that for over 2 decades, I've been keeping a ledger. Every crime, every fabrication, every life he crushed under his heel, it's all accounted for. She synced a drive to the main display. Those files my brother just paraded in front of you, they didn't exist until 3 days ago. The digital footprint is unmistakable. They are forgeries commissioned from Sebastian Rios, a man with a well-known talent for creative fiction. The screen behind me proves it. Creation timestamps, edit logs, the smoking gun in binary code. But the fraud is just the appetizer, Camilla pressed on. These are the unedited tapes. Listen to Maximiliano order the systematic ruin of Renata Vega. Her only crime? Having a daughter whose natural brilliance humiliated a man who thinks talent is something you can purchase. Ferrara's voice boomed through the speakers, distinct and damning. Blacklist the mother. I want her unemployable in this city. and throw the kid into the foster system. Let's see how they like learning their place when they cross me. The press pool erupted. Camera strobes turned the room into a chaotic storm of white light. Ferrara stumbled back, his mask of untouchable arrogance shattering into sheer panic. "It's a deepfake. Altered audio," he bellowed. "It's a setup. The only setup here was engineered by you." Aurelio stepped out from the shadows. "I watched you treat human lives like disposable assets for years, and I said nothing. That complicity ends right now." He locked eyes with Renata, receiving a subtle nod of permission. "Renata Vega is my daughter. Luciana is my granddaughter. I hid that truth out of cowardice for decades, yes, but I never plotted to steal back a company. My only agenda was shielding my blood from the monster I helped build." Realizing the ship was going down, Sebastian Rios scrambled for a lifeboat. "Wait, I can cut a deal." He lunged for a mic. "Ferrara made me do it. He said he'd ruin my career, my life, if I didn't cook the books. I have leverage. Files on dirty deals nobody even suspects yet." "Shut your mouth!" Ferrara charged at his former fixer, but security intercepted him mid-stride. The commotion was cut short as federal agents breached the room. "Maximiliano Ferrara," the lead agent announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, bribery of public officials, forgery, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." As the cuffs clicked shut, Ferrara glared at Luciana with unadulterated venom. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I have money. I have friends in high places. I'll be back." Luciana met his gaze, unwavering. "No, Mr. Ferrara, you won't, because now the world sees the man behind the curtain, and the world has a long memory." The following months were defined by the slow process of rebuilding. Regulators tore Ferrara Holdings apart piece by piece. They unearthed decades of rot. Payoffs, intimidation, ruined livelihoods. The gavel eventually fell. Maximiliano was handed a 25-year sentence. Sebastian Rios traded his testimony for lighter time, but the Bar Association stripped him of his license permanently. Assets seized from the Ferrara empire were liquidated to pay restitution to the people he had stepped on to get to the top. Dozens of families, previously crushed just like Luciana's, finally saw a measure of justice. And that $1 million Ferrara had dangled as a cruel joke? The court mandated it be paid out as legitimate damages to Luciana Vega. "I don't want his blood money," Luciana said when the lawyers told her. "Then use it to build something pure," Aurelio suggested, and she did. 6 months post-trial, the Catalina Vega Foundation launched. Bearing her grandmother's name, the organization focused on scouting and funding brilliant young minds from the wrong side of the tracks. Kids with extraordinary gifts but zero access to open doors. Exactly the position Luciana had once been in. Elena Dubois, Omar Al-Rashid, and Yuki Tanaka stepped up as the anchor donors. Camila Montero funneled her entire family inheritance into scholarships. As for Aurelio, having finally made peace with Renata, he spent his twilight years working side by side with his granddaughter. Renata made a full recovery. With access to top-tier specialists they could finally afford, she regained her strength, ending up healthier than she had been in years. She took a role as the Foundation's coordinator, guiding other mothers navigating the same treacherous waters she had survived. "Mom," Luciana asked one afternoon as they sifted through scholarship applications, "have you forgiven Don Aurelio?" Renata offered a gentle smile. "Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, honey. It's a road you walk. But every time I see him trying to balance the scales, every time he looks at you like a grandfather should, I take another step down that road. And maybe when I'm ready, when he's ready, and we've both healed enough, I'll finally call him Dad again." On Luciana's birthday, an envelope arrived from the federal penitentiary. It was from Maximiliano Ferrara. "I don't expect redemption," the shaky handwriting read. "I know I have no right to say this, but I need you to know. Every single day in this place, I replay that moment. You managed to shame my arrogance without even cracking a smile. You proved that true power isn't about bank accounts or fancy titles. It is about self-respect, a kind of dignity I traded away a long time ago, assuming I ever really possessed it. Your grandmother, Catalina, was extraordinary. I finally understand why my uncle fell so hard for her, and I see exactly where you get your spirit. I hope that one day, when you are all grown up, you will look back and realize that even monsters are capable of learning a lesson, even if it took a lifetime to get there." Luciana read the letter 3 times before quietly tucking it away. She didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. Some scars just need time to fade. Some questions have no answers, and some people just have to live with the wreckage they created. Years later, Luciana Vega walked into the United Nations as the youngest interpreter they had ever hired. The media ate up her story, documentaries, books, films, but she never let the spotlight stay on her. "This isn't about me," she would tell every reporter. "It is my mother's story. She worked herself to the bone so I could have a shot. It is about my grandmother, Catalina, who passed down this gift for languages before we ever met. It is the story of all the invisible people who have brilliant minds but never get the chance to show the world what they can do." In her corner office, she kept a single-framed photo on her desk. It captured that day at Ferrara Holdings. A little girl in a school uniform clutching her backpack, surrounded by a ring of corporate suits sneering down at her. Beneath the glass, a small brass plate bore the words her mother had whispered to her that night in the hospital. Words have the power to change the world. And they certainly had, because one little girl proved that talent does not need a certificate, that dignity is not for sale, and that sometimes the biggest giants are brought down by the smallest voices. All it takes is the courage to speak up and one person willing to listen.